Hi, welcome to Healing the Trauma Within. In this session, I am talking with Dana Kaplan, and we're going to be talking about empowerment versus self-abandonment. A little bit about Dana. She is an award-winning early childhood and emotional intelligence expert. Dana empowers children, families, and adults to use their positively powerful voice in order to engage in hard conversations with rich self-awareness, compassion, acceptance, and empathy. Welcome, Dana.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Well, I'm super excited to have you. This is a great topic because I think so many of us trauma survivors do kind of just abandon ourselves, at some point. And I know one of my goals is, or my missions is women empowerment. So this is a big topic for me.
I'm honored to be here. It's very easy to abandon yourself. It's very easy to put everyone else first. It's very easy to be a people pleaser and want to look perfect in society and look perfect in all arenas. But the reality is, you are when you abandon yourself, everyone else abandons you too, and the self-awareness that comes with when we are abandoning our own self, when we are not sticking to our boundaries, when we are giving too much energy to people, or when we're allowing people to suck the energy out from us. It really shifts how we show up in the world. And so empowering ourselves first through self-awareness and knowing how much we can handle and how much we want to handle, right? It's not that we can't. It's not that we're unable to. It's I will not accept this. I'm unavailable for. Or it's yes, I would love to. Yes, let me help, right? And so being aware and learning at a very young age, it's critical because as children, we're parrots. We're constantly repeating everything that we hear. And it starts off with, when we're in the womb and we hear the conversations that, our parents are having, or, our mom is having with other people. It's how are they speaking and what are they saying? And then, once we actually do come into the world and we are constantly looking around and observing and seeing how people are either empowering themselves or empowering others or abandoning their own self and honestly abandoning other people as well. And so it's a critical skill that is not taught in school, and it is a critical skill that I purposefully and intentionally teach on a daily basis and show parents and children and teams and in communities how we can empower so that we don't lose ourselves in the process.
So I guess my next question would be, how do we go about it? How do we move out of that self-abandonment phase?
Oh my God, it's so
It's
funny.
Harley, everybody, meet Harley. How do we move out of the self-abandonment phase and into empowerment?
It starts honestly with parents. It starts honestly with parents getting real with themselves and being aware of what they are accepting. So if adults, and actually, let me retract that. It's not a parents because I'm not a parent. It's about adults recognizing when am I standing in my power and when am I retracting and abandoning. So an example would be me choosing to be on your podcast, right? Me choosing to show up and share my mission with the world. I'm not doing it because I'm looking to please you. I'm not doing it because I'm looking to, have all of these people following me and thinking I'm amazing. I'm doing it because I'm so intent on making sure that we shift the paradigm on how we use language and how we support one another as humans, right? So it starts with human to human. It starts with really checking in and saying, hey, how are you? How are you? What's going on? And stopping and pausing and listening. So the first step is connection and really making that connection. And then when you can make that connection, you can build trust. And through trust, you actually then see, okay, I'm standing in an environment, something doesn't feel good in my body. I don't like the language or the tone of voice I'm hearing from someone. How will I choose to make a shift? Right. And that critical space of when we recognize that that something feels uncomfortable within, and when we know that we can make a different choice, right? That's the crossroad. That's when it's like, do we actually empower ourselves and speak up and say, I really appreciate that you're passionate or you're feeling intense about whatever you're bringing to the table. However, your tone of voice is making me feel uncomfortable. And I know you can't make me feel uncomfortable, but the dynamic of what we're experiencing is a lot. Do you think maybe we could take a break, or can we come back, or can we reconvene at another date, right? That's self-empowerment. To do self-abandonment is for me just to stand there and for me to take it and to do nothing, right? So it starts with us. It starts with us and how we choose to show up. It starts with us and how we choose to model. It starts with us and how we choose to tell our stories. It starts with us and how we encourage other people to tell their stories. So that's really the most critical. It's the connection, the trust, and then using our voice.
Where does healing from our traumas come into play in all of this? Because I think, if we're still neck deep in experiencing our trauma and, in that survivor stage, but not the thriver stage, we're going to be stuck in the self-abandonment stage. So, how do we, where does that healing come into play?
That is a great question. I was working with a group of people yesterday who have just re-entered the workforce, and it was a mixture of people, 15 people in a small group, and we were talking about how the trauma from the pandemic is really still affecting all of us differently on the daily, and the only way for us to actually heal the trauma within is to first of all acknowledge it and to freely talk about it. I have an energy coach, and she has told me so many times, write a letter and burn it. It is honestly one of the most cathartic experiences I've ever had. It's so cathartic. You write down everything, like anything about the experience, it just sucks the breath out of you. And sobbing and screaming and doing all the things while you're writing this letter. And then as you watch this piece of paper burn away with small little ashes, it's literally like taking the life away. It's taking the meaning away from the heaviness of the trauma. Does it eradicate the trauma? No. Does it uplift you to a point where you can say, okay, that was a moment in my life when I experienced trauma and I want to move on, and I'm going to choose to move on now because my mind and my heart are ready. That's different, right? We can never, so healing trauma is also, it's very important that we don't ever, um, being a social emotional expert is not being a therapist. I want to be very clear on that, right? So I did not go to school for social work. I did not go to school for psychology. I'm an early childhood expert, and I've been to many, many, many trauma trainings. The one big takeaway that I've received from every single one of them is there is never a time frame that anyone can give you on how long it will take you to heal. And that piece is really important to take in. And I'm going to say it again. Your healing process and how you heal and the longevity of your healing is going to be completely different from mine. And we cannot compare, we cannot judge. Because when we bring on those other emotions, when we bring on the judgment, when we bring on the comparison, it puts us into an icky state of not allowing us to recognize and honor where our feelings are at, and really not moving through the bigger problem, which is the trauma, right? We're just adding something on top of the trauma now.
Right.
And when we can detach from the judgment, and when we can detach from the longevity of the process of healing, right? We can then look at the experience as a moment in time, a moment that taught us something, a moment that I can now use to support other people. You know, I speak a lot about how when I was younger, I used to sign my dad's name to my reading log. And when I first started telling my students that, they were like, you would never do that. And I was like, oh, I did. And it traumatized me because I was like, my dad caught me, right? And our traumas, they don't have to be some massive, explosion. They can
Right.
be as simple as, I don't trust myself to tell other people that I'm having a hard time in school. I don't trust that somebody's going to help me. I am going to be shamed and ridiculed. I'm going to feel stupid. Like, I mean, the gamut of the spectrum right there, right? So it has taken me many, many years to heal that trauma from when I was a child because I did not know how to ask for help. So that is why it's so critical for me to help children, to guide children, to propel children and adults of all ages to use our voice. How do we ask for help? How do we ask for what we need, right? So when we talk about healing our traumas, they can be small t to mega, and one is not any worse than the other because they've all affected us in some form or fashion.
Right.
And so that's another big piece to the puzzle when we're looking at how are we going to heal? How do we heal? And how do we want to heal? Because that's another big piece. Like, you have to choose to want to heal. You have to choose to want to get beyond what has happened to you in your life. And that in itself, that taking that radical personal responsibility, saying, I'm not a victim, that was an experience. I'm not blaming, I'm not going to shame. It was an experience in time. I can now move in the direction that I choose, right? So that's all part of the whole healing process behind it.
I love that you talked about not comparing our journeys and not comparing our traumas either. I think so often we're like, well, my trauma wasn't really as bad as hers, so I shouldn't be feeling this way. And you can't do that because your trauma is yours and your emotions are yours, you know?
Yeah, and they're all valid. They're all valid. As humans, I believe that we all want to be seen, heard, and loved. And
Mm-hmm.
through all of those pieces, we are validated. And when we're not seen, heard, and loved, that's when the traumas generally happen, right? That's when somebody is abandoning us. That's when we learn how to abandon our own self. That's when we learn to be ignored. That's when we learn to be loud. That's when we learn to overcompensate for various areas. And for us to empower, we must start with, where am I abandoning myself? And get really honest with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And have those conversations, those really hard conversations with children, and have those really hard conversations with your friends and your family and your team members and your colleagues and your bosses. Because the reality is this: we now all are given a gift. I believe that this time had been needed to be called physically distancing while socially gathering, but it was constantly called socially distancing. No one in this world needed to socially distance. We all needed to physically distance to stay healthy and safe. Socially gathering is what we needed. So when we think about the trauma right now, one of the big things that keeps coming up in a lot of the conversations that I'm leading is that people weren't checking in on me. They felt abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
So then now they're coming back into society where everything's opening up and they don't know how to re-enter. Right? So it's those little moments in time of, how do I help myself? How do I not compare myself to someone else? How do I not judge myself of what I experienced and how I experienced it? What will I do now? What do I want to do now to make it different? And now is the beautiful time because society's trappings had kept shackles on us for centuries, right? And told us exactly what we're supposed to do, how females should act, how males should act, about gender, race, so many stereotypes. Now, after all of this isolation, after all of this new awareness around how we can work, where we can work, how children learn, where children learn, around socialization, around emotional intelligence, we all get to create our new normal. So my new normal specifically is keeping to my boundaries. If something doesn't feel good to me, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. And I don't need to apologize for not doing it. Right. And that piece right there is empowering me not to self-abandon. And it's also empowering others to see what empowerment looks like.
I like that. Yeah, I've been really focused on my boundaries, creating them. What do they look like? How do they feel? What are hard boundaries and what are soft boundaries that, maybe I can let slide once in a while.
Hard and soft boundaries are really important. That's a great topic.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. Because I think that is, it is a big part of moving from self-abandonment to empowerment is creating our boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's talk about the difference between hard and soft boundaries.
So it's interesting because a hard boundary is personal space. End of story.
Right.
My body is mine. No one gets to come in my personal space, which is also why my energy healer actually taught me that. That's why for 6 feet, when we were told to stay 6 feet apart, it's energetically nothing can come into your space, right? So now as people come closer, you're starting to feel more energy coming closer to you. So you feel it more intensely. So a very hard boundary for every human is, this is my body, do not touch my body, right?
Right.
A soft boundary could easily be I always laugh about this, but when my family's all together, we like to see who can wake each other up the earliest. That's family coming together and having fun together. That's a soft boundary. I want to see you wake up early. I want to go play with you. I want to go do something fun, right? A hard boundary is, please do not wake me up before 9 o'clock. Right? So you're setting the tone of, this is what I want. If I don't set that tone and somebody wakes me up, that's a soft boundary, right? It's like, okay, I'd really love to be sleeping now, but I didn't tell someone, right? No one needs to be told, though, flat out. A hard boundary is literally, do not touch my body. Do not scream at me, right? Those are hard boundaries. Those are non-negotiables that everyone holds. But again, when we're talking about soft boundaries, if you wake me up at 8:55 instead of 9 o'clock, it's not the end of the world. But if you're doing something that is detrimental to me, or you're doing something that is detrimental to others, those are the hard boundaries that we really have to look at.
Right. And upholding those boundaries, not letting those hard boundaries become soft boundaries.
Yeah.
And also respecting other people's boundaries as well. If you expect people to respect your boundaries, then you best be respecting theirs.
It's interesting. So my heart and soul will always be with kindergartners. There's something so magical about working with children at that age. They're finding their voice. They're starting to make their own opinions. They're starting to ask questions that are higher level. Their critical thinking is shifting. Their brains are developing in such a rapid speed. And what I love about that age is that we can actually teach children between the ages of 0 to 7 how to create boundaries for themselves and to sustain them. The problem comes when there's inconsistencies. So if I tell you, you have to take your shoes off before you come into the house, and everywhere else you go, you're told you can keep your shoes on, those inconsistencies start playing with your mind. And they seem trivial. They really, really seem trivial. But on a larger scale, that's like, well, when do I ask a question? When do I need permission? When do I check in with someone, right? So we have a responsibility as a society, as a community, as a humanity, to help one another understand, listen, your boundaries may be different from mine, and that's completely fine. It's not right or wrong, it's not good or bad, it's not positive or negative. This is your boundary and this is mine, and we have to respect that, right? So when I come to your house and you want my shoes off my feet so I don't bring dirt in from the outside world, I will respect that. But when you come into my house, it's okay, right? It's not a big deal. But we have to make sure that we articulate those boundaries. And that's the problem. That is the biggest problem, is that as a collective, we are not articulating our boundaries, either our boundaries at work, our boundaries with work, our boundaries with children, our boundaries with colleagues, our boundaries with friends, our boundaries with partners. I was on a coaching call last night, and I was working with a client on, have you actually articulated what you need right now in this scenario? And they were like, well, I think I have. And as soon as we say, I think I have, we clearly have not, right? Saying, I want communication, that helps me feel comfortable and confident. That is a hard boundary for me. That is saying, and it's interesting that I use the word boundary there, right? Because it's like, I'm letting you know what I need. And needs are boundaries. Needs are, how far can I go until I break? And we don't want to get you broken. We don't want to see you broken. We want to keep you calm and comfortable and moving forward, right? So when we really think about boundaries, we first have to think about, how are we using our voice to advocate for who we are and what we need personally in order to establish those boundaries. So then nothing gets broken. So then respect is given. So then love is reciprocated. So everything is reciprocated on a, and it's safe. That's the most important piece, that it's safe.
Absolutely. Well, Dana, thank you so much for coming on and talking with me today. This has been fantastic.
So thank you for having me. I love what you're doing. I love what you're doing.
Thank you. And listeners, thank you for joining us in this session. We'll talk to you in one of the next sessions.